Following my father's funeral, a period when discussions about inheritance were common, my brother-in-law, who is married to my sister Sharon, surprisingly claimed that all of my father's assets, including $7 million in cash and stocks, should solely belong to Sharon, the eldest child. This proposal brought joy to my sister and her husband, yet the lawyer quickly clarified that such a decision wasn't theirs to make. My name is Paul Walker, a 44-year-old sales professional with a wife and 3 kids. My father was a significant shareholder in a company and remained actively involved until his later years. Sharon, my elder sister, has often challenged our parents with her erratic behavior, and even in her middle age, lacks a stable job, choosing to live life on her own terms. Our relationship has been distant, primarily due to my disapproval of her actions. When Sharon turned 52, she unexpectedly introduced us to Russell Brand, a younger, handsome man with a laid-back attitude, and announced their engagement. Despite her financial instability, Sharon didn't hesitate to ask for a substantial sum from our father to cover wedding expenses, quickly depleting it, and then audaciously requesting more. This behavior greatly distressed our father, given her presumptuous attitude towards inheritance. The news of our father's sudden heart attack and subsequent passing deeply affected me. Amidst receiving condolences from friends and relatives, I stepped up to assist my overwhelmed mother with the funeral preparations while Sharon remained absent, engrossed in her own life. The day following the funeral, as my mother and I were beginning to find solace, a lawyer arrived to discuss my father's will. Unaware of its contents, Sharon and her husband audaciously interrupted, asserting that Sharon was entitled to all of my father's stocks and the $7 million inheritance, leaving my mother and me speechless at their boldness. In a moment filled with anticipation, my brother-in-law jubilantly proclaimed, "We've made it, Sharon." This inheritance sets us for life, his fist cutting through the air in triumph. The lawyer, taken aback by such presumption, intervened with caution. Capturing my sister's fierce gaze, he looked at them both squarely and revealed, "Sharon, you have no claim to the inheritance." My sister and her husband, visibly shocked, countered with disbelief, arguing that as the eldest daughter, Sharon was naturally entitled to everything. It was evident my brother-in-law had placed all his bets on this inheritance, convinced it would all go to my sister. Their confusion only deepened when the lawyer, with a gentler tone, dropped a bombshell. "Were you unaware that Sharon is not Mr. Paul's biological child?" Instantly, the color drained from my sister's face as she turned to our mother, her eyes wide with panic. Our mother, her expression a mix of emotions, faced a moment of truth I had long been aware of. My sister was a half-sibling, a fact that had been hidden from her. Confronting our mother, Sharon's voice trembled. "What does this mean?" To which our mother confessed, "Sharon, you come from my first marriage." The revelation stunned Sharon, who had always playfully claimed the title of the favored child. Her husband, trying to grasp at straws, argued that Sharon, being legally adopted, must still be entitled to a share of the inheritance. That's what I assumed Sharon supported. Yet our mother's next words shattered that belief. There had been no formal adoption. In disbelief, Sharon protested, "But I'm the eldest daughter." Dad even acknowledged it. Her frustration now turned towards me accusingly. "You're going to let him take everything." She challenged me. Annoyed by her sense of entitlement, I couldn't help but respond, pointing out her continual reliance on our father's generosity. Despite it, as they insisted on the fairness of a father's support for his daughter, I was reminded of how my sister used his financial aid not for growth, but to bail herself out of recurring predicaments. It was then that Mrs. Paul, our mother, who had been silent, suggested, "Perhaps it's time Sharon reviewed the will as well." Caught off guard, Sharon panicked. "The will." I don't know anything about that. It was her lack of attention and engagement that had led to this moment. Our father had intended for us to discuss the will together when he drafted it, but Sharon, uninterested at the time, chose leisure over matters. Highlighting the omission from the will, I saw my brother-in-law's frustration flare as he sharply questioned Sharon. "What were you thinking?" This mattered. The realization dawned that they had to confront the contents of my father's will. The lawyer clarified that the inheritance was designated for me and my mother, citing my father's hesitance to adopt Sharon due to her indifferent attitude towards me, her spending habits, and her overall conduct. Sharon was visibly shaken by the news that she had no legal claim to any inheritance. At this revelation, my brother-in-law's temper escalated, accusingly pointing out to Sharon, "You promised there was wealth." His attitude became threatening, shocking my mother and Sharon, though I wasn't surprised, given his history of greed and opportunistic behavior. He coldly told Sharon not to return until she had secured some money, revealing his true motives and leaving everyone in dismay as he abruptly left the scene. Feeling betrayed and cornered, Sharon turned her frustration towards us, particularly our mother, lamenting, "Why wasn't I legally adopted? It's unfair that the inheritance bypasses me." Her outburst was raw and filled with a sense of betrayal, causing a stir that the lawyer witnessed with seasoned calm. When Sharon accused me of being the undeserved beneficiary simply because I was our father's biological son, her words cut deep. But I realized that my existence was not the root of her exclusion. It was her actions and choices. Before the situation could escalate further, the lawyer intervened, warning that her behavior could lead to legal consequences, a reminder that made Sharon pause, likely recalling her previous misdemeanors. As time passed, the inheritance process concluded smoothly, thanks in part to the lawyer's expertise, leaving no room for further dispute from Sharon or her husband. Despite their initial discontent, my mother decided to give Sharon some financial assistance, a gesture I chose not to comment on. Their subsequent disappearance with the funds only underscored their true intentions, leaving a bitter impression among our relatives who were privy to the saga. Seeking to uplift our spirits, I organized a family meal with my mother, wife, and daughter. The outing, suggested by my wife, brought a noticeable change in my mother's demeanor, brightened by the presence of her granddaughter, offering a moment of joy amidst the ongoing family turmoil. During a moment of calm, I suggested to my mom, "How about moving in with us?" But I was quick to add, knowing the unpredictability tied to my sister Sharon, she might drop by seeking help, especially financial. We should be cautious not to enable her too much. My mom's hesitation was palpable. Sharon, despite everything, was her daughter, and the prospect of potentially inviting conflict held her back. I left the offer open for her to ponder. As we approached our ancestral home, we were greeted by an unexpected sight. Lights on in what should have been an empty house. Suspecting Sharon might have returned, I proposed, "Let's have a quick coffee inside." As we got out of the car, suddenly, a car charged towards us, missing us by a whisker. In protecting my wife and responding to my daughter's alarmed cry, I ended up in a flower bed, slightly injured by the fleeting touch of the car, which eventually crashed into the garage entrance. My wife and daughter rushed to my aid, while my mother, frozen with shock, watched from the doorway. The incident led to my hospitalization overnight, and I later found out that Russell Brand, my brother-in-law, was behind the wheel, claiming a mix-up between the accelerator and the brake, a story I found hard to swallow. When my mother and sister visited me in the hospital, Sharon's response to my condition was chilling, hinting at her disappointment in my resilience, almost as if she had hoped for a more beneficial outcome for herself. I couldn't resist commenting on her apparent wish for my demise to claim the inheritance, noting her unease as she averted her gaze. I then revealed that our mother intended to relinquish her inheritance in my favor, making any drastic actions from their side futile. My sister's shock was evident. The concept of foregoing a rightful inheritance seemed alien to her. I further explained that in preparation and following our father's prudent approach, I had already drafted a will ensuring my family's future, thus redirecting the inheritance away from our mother directly to them. My sister's plea for a share from the speculated $7 million, under the guise of familial generosity, only highlighted her desperation and misunderstanding of our family's values and intentions. In the aftermath of firmly rejecting my sister Sharon's demand for a substantial share of the inheritance, the atmosphere in the hospital room shifted dramatically. Sharon's demeanor transformed, her face contorting into a visage of pure fury as she physically accosted me, her hands gripping my collar in desperation. "Give me half. I'm your sister," she demanded, her voice laced with a chilling blend of anger and desperation. It was a distressing sight, witnessing her descent into what appeared to be a state of irrationality, driven to the brink by her intense desire for inheritance. Her actions, so starkly at odds with the values our father held dear, made me regard her with a deep sense of pity and disappointment. "Do you not realize how your greed would have disappointed Dad?" I questioned, hoping to ignite some sense of reason within her. Yet this only served to inflame her anger further as she made a grab for my throat in a shocking escalation of violence. The situation took a dramatic turn when our mother's voice, tinged with alarm and authority, cut through the tension. Nurses quickly intervened, escorting a visibly shaken Sharon away from me. Despite the turmoil, it was evident that my mother's heart ached for Sharon, her biological daughter, even though Sharon had directed her vitriol towards her as well. Where did I go wrong in raising her? My mother lamented, a question heavy with sorrow and regret that echoed in the sterile hospital corridor. The emotional and physical toll of the incident was soon overshadowed by my mother's deteriorating health. As her condition worsened, my wife and I found ourselves more involved in her day-to-day care, a development that seemed to provoke Sharon's resentment. Her feelings of exclusion were palpable, especially as she confronted the reality of our increased presence in our mother's life. This tension reached a boiling point when Sharon, in an abrupt phone call, insisted that she and Russell would take over caring for our mother, effectively sidelining my wife and me. Her declaration was unexpected and filled with a certainty that brooked no argument. Despite my attempts to reason with her, to discuss what was best for our mother, Sharon remained unmoved, ending the call with a finality that left us stunned. Confirming this sudden shift with my wife, who had received a similar message, we were both left concerned for our mother's well-being, especially considering Sharon and Russell's lack of experience in caregiving and household management. Surprisingly, Russell claimed to have some caregiving experience, a small comfort given our mother's still manageable level of independence. Yet this reassurance was short-lived. Within a month, a grave medication error sent our mother to the hospital, her condition alarmingly frail. It was a mistake that was unlike her, known for her meticulousness, especially with her medication. As my wife remained by my mother's bedside, offering the support and love she needed, I ventured back to the family home. What greeted me was a scene of neglect. A bare refrigerator, a poignant reminder of my mother's once vibrant love for cooking, and the absence of the household help that had been a staple in our family's life. The disarray spoke volumes of the care, or lack thereof, that Sharon and Russell had promised, casting a long shadow over their capability to manage the responsibilities they had so confidently claimed they could handle. Discovering that a considerable sum of money had been withdrawn from my mother's bank account filled me with regret for ever placing trust in my sister. Despite the safety measures, with her bank card and PIN securely locked away, the funds meant for everyday expenses had nearly vanished. While thankfully the inheritance remained safe in a separate deposit box, this breach of trust prompted me to collect necessary items for my mother's hospital stay, including her bank card, to address the financial anomaly. Upon discussing the situation with my mother, it became apparent she was oblivious to the mishandling of her bank card. Yet when the conversation shifted to the medication mishap, a shadow of sorrow crossed her face as she admitted it was Russell, my brother-in-law, who had prepared it. The suggestion that Sharon should no longer be welcomed into the house seemed more urgent than ever. My mother's condition and the chaotic state of our home were alarming. "Mom, you need to stay with us," I insisted, envisioning a peaceful home for her recovery. Despite this, her health worsened, possibly exacerbated by stress, leading to her untimely demise. The somber task of arranging her funeral revealed a grim reality. The family home was stripped of its valuables, a testament to my sister and Russell's relentless greed. The emptiness of the house mirrored my feelings of shock and betrayal, fueling a resolve to seek justice for their egregious actions. The aftermath of my mother's funeral set the stage for a meeting with the lawyer, where my sister audaciously claimed her entitlement to our mother's inheritance. Her confidence wavered as the will was read, revealing her exclusion from any inheritance, a directive from our father reflecting his final wishes. Russell's outrage at this revelation only compounded the tension, his frustration manifesting in a destructive outburst. Amidst his tirade, I confronted him with a pressing question, one that hinted at a dark suspicion. "Russell, did you attempt to harm my mom?" The gravity of the situation hung in the air, marking a pivotal moment in our family saga as we awaited his response. The truth of their actions was poised to come to light under the scrutiny of the law. As I squarely faced him, Russell returned my inquiry with a look of irritation. "I've done nothing wrong," he defensively claimed when questioned about the medication error. His annoyance was palpable, emphasizing their fixation on the inheritance rather than the well-being of our mother. Sharon, losing any semblance of calm, chimed in, outraged at the prospect of being left out of the inheritance. Her reaction betrayed her motives. It wasn't concern for our mother that drove her, but rather the hope of solving her financial woes with the inheritance. "Is it true that I'm getting nothing?" She demanded an explanation from the lawyer, her voice a mix of disbelief and desperation. The lawyer began to outline the specifics of the inheritance distribution, taking into account the funds Sharon had prematurely withdrawn and the value of the items she had sold. The end result left little to nothing for her, a revelation that left her visibly frustrated. I couldn't help but interject, highlighting that this outcome was the result of careful legal consultation. "That can't be all that's left," Sharon muttered, a clear indication of her disillusionment with the reality of her financial dependency on our parents, never having to face the struggles of earning a living. My disappointment in her turned to anger. "Mom thought you'd look after her, but instead you just took her money and left her alone," I accused, unable to hide my disdain for her actions. Sharon retorted, demanding evidence of the expenses incurred for our mother's care. I challenged her to justify the spending, extending my hand for the receipts, knowing full well she had none. "I don't have them," she stammered, her confidence waning. The lawyer underscored the importance of such documentation, leaving Sharon at a loss for words. Russell then tried to appeal to my sense of family, urging me to support Sharon despite everything, but my resolve was unshaken. Their desperation was evident, and Russell's admission that Sharon would have inherited everything if their plan had succeeded only added to my suspicion of their true intentions. "What do you mean by that?" I pressed, seeking clarity on his revealing comment, ready to uncover the extent of their schemes. As the tension in the room escalated, Russell inadvertently made a comment that shifted the atmosphere drastically, revealing their true intentions. Because of this guy, things never go right. I was expecting a new car out of this deal, but now I'm stuck with just enough for some repairs, he lamented, not realizing the weight of his words. My sister Sharon attempted to intervene, perhaps to salvage the situation, but the damage was done. The lawyer, seizing the moment, underscored the gravity of Russell's admission. That's a serious allegation, akin to fraud, she observed, barely concealing a smile as she eyed the couple. Her next revelation caught them off guard. This meeting has been recorded with your consent, she reminded, effectively trapping Russell in his own narrative. Realizing the depth of his blunder, Russell's confidence deflated. Seizing the moment, I informed him of my intentions to press charges for the accident. Russell's attempt to dismiss the threat as baseless was quickly undermined by his own words, now recorded evidence. The situation spiraled for them as Sharon, overwhelmed by the turn of events, berated Russell for his carelessness, despairing over their predicament. In the aftermath, Russell faced criminal charges, his prior misdeeds compounding the legal action against him, leading to his arrest. Sharon, implicated for her role, received a milder sentence due to her lesser involvement. Facing financial ruin, she reached out to relatives for support, only to be met with rejection, a consequence of her actions and their fallout. As for me, witnessing the unraveling of my sister and brother-in-law schemes brought a complex mix of vindication and sorrow. The path they chose not only led to their downfall, but also strained familial bonds, leaving a lasting impact on all involved. I kept on working hard, choosing not to depend on any inheritance. Instead, I found comfort and a bit of joy in the dividends that came from my investments in stocks, considering it a small but satisfying reward for my efforts.
This vacation house is only for my mom and dad. Your parents can't stay here, my husband declared, surprising me with his words after buying a fancy vacation house worth $1 million. So that's what this is all about. I realized his intentions and felt fed up. Okay, but you'll regret this decision, I warned him. Never come near me again, Terry smirked, folding his arms. If that's how it is, I won't be nice either. I'll make him sorry. My name's Kathy. I married Robert 4 years ago, and we've been living together happily. We don't really have any hobbies, so we've been saving a lot of money. If I had to pick one thing we splurge on, it's probably making fancy coffee on weekends. Oh, by the way, isn't your mom's birthday coming up soon? I asked Robert while holding a freshly brewed cup of coffee. We're both in our mid-30s. Robert's parents just turned 60 this year, a year before mine. What if we give them a spa getaway as a birthday gift? It could be a lovely treat, don't you think? I suggested. Robert thought it was a good idea, saying, "That sounds nice. I'll check with my parents if they have any specific wishes. If not, we'll go with a spa retreat. It's like hitting 2 birds with 1 stone." I didn't mean it that way, I clarified. I know, just kidding. Next time I see my parents, I'll bring it up with them. Kathy, can you find some good spas? Robert asked me. Sure thing. How about we join them on the trip? It'd be a nice change, I suggested. 2 weeks went by, and my mother-in-law's birthday was approaching quickly. We should book a spa soon, otherwise, we might not make it in time for my father-in-law's birthday. Did you talk to your parents? I asked anxiously. My husband replied casually, "Oh, I forgot to mention. I already checked with them, so no need to book a spa." Oh, really? That's a relief. But what did they say they wanted? I was eager to decide the gift together, but my husband seemed bothered by the question. I'll take care of it. It's my parents' 60th birthday. You don't have to worry about it, Kathy, he said, dismissing my involvement. Robert's words took me aback. He'd never dismissed me like this before. That wasn't very nice, I said, feeling emotional. Why won't you tell me? We've always chosen gifts together. We'd even picked gifts for each other's parents in the past. So why, on such an important occasion like their 60th birthday, would you shut me out like this? I don't understand, I said, frustration creeping in. Normally, I'm pretty calm and don't raise my voice often, but my husband remained stubborn. In the end, he wouldn't budge on telling me what his parents wanted. Since then, there's been tension between us, and we only talk about necessary things. Even when we drink our morning coffee, the silence hangs heavy. The day before my mother-in-law's birthday, my husband finally spoke to me after a long silence. We're going out tomorrow to celebrate Mom's 60th. Get ready, Kathy. We're staying overnight, so be prepared, he informed me suddenly. I panicked. What? Where are we going? You should have told me earlier. If we're staying overnight, I need time to prepare, I protested. I just told you, didn't I? You're going to be surprised. My husband replied cheerfully, contrasting my anxiety. The next morning, we hopped into the car early to pick up my in-laws. They were bursting with excitement from the moment we saw them. I'm so thrilled. I never imagined celebrating my birthday like this. Thank you so much, they exclaimed. Isn't it wonderful? My husband asked. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Robert, I replied, feeling a bit awkward since I hadn't been part of choosing the gift. Even when my in-laws expressed their gratitude, I could only respond vaguely. Then unexpectedly, my husband spoke up. It's all thanks to Kathy. Thank you, he said, supporting me. I was touched by his consideration, despite our recent disagreements. It felt like we were getting back to our old selves. My mood lifted, and I decided to enjoy the journey to our destination. We arrived at a beautiful cabin nestled in the woods. The entrance was spacious, and the living room had huge glass windows giving it a charming appeal surrounded by trees. The cabin felt like it blended perfectly with nature. There were 3 bedrooms and even a hot tub in the bathroom. This is where we're staying. It's so beautiful, I said excitedly to my husband, expressing regret for my earlier attitude. I never imagined Robert would pick such an amazing place. I don't think I could have found such a gem myself. Trusting Robert with a decision was definitely the right call. I'm sorry for being so cranky lately, I admitted, feeling a surge of excitement as I took in the beauty of the cabin. Then, out of the blue, my husband said something unexpected. It's no big deal. If there were just me, I wouldn't have been able to afford this cabin. It's all thanks to Kathy that we have it, he said. When I was suddenly speechless as my mind raced with questions, my in-laws chimed in. Thank you, Kathy. We never expected such a wonderful gift, did we? We were thinking about getting a new place for ourselves when we turned 60, even considering living together. But remember, we decided against that, right? So, we thought a cabin would be perfect, and we've been discussing it with Robert since he got married. It was true that I turned down the idea of living together once. I wanted to savor our time as a couple, and my in-laws were still healthy, so I felt it was too soon for us to move in together. Robert agreed, and we decided we'd move in together when my in-laws needed assistance. But I never expected them to request a new home as a gift for their 60th birthday, let alone a cabin. That felt like a bit much. Trying to keep my panic at bay, I turned to my husband, Robert. You're kidding, right? There's no way we could afford such a beautiful cabin. Why spring a surprise on me? It's your mom's birthday. The surprise should be for her. It's not a joke. We really bought this cabin, my husband replied. Everything seemed to blur before my eyes in a daze. Wait a minute. I had no idea about any of this. And it's not fair to just spring it on me like this. You just said it was a lovely cabin. It's ours. That's not the point. How much did this vacation home cost? I vented my frustration at him. He dropped a bombshell. $1 million. What? $1 million, and you spent it on my parents' 60th birthday. I couldn't believe it. The amount was staggering, leaving me reeling. To make matters worse, my husband revealed another shocking fact. We couldn't get a loan for $1 million property in both our names, so I used all our savings since we got married, the joint account, as a down payment. At this point, I was beyond shocked and simply speechless. How could he make such a selfish decision without even consulting me? I couldn't comprehend it at all. Despite my disbelief, my husband continued casually, Well, it's done now. There's no going back. And I did take your preference of not living together into account, didn't I? With this vacation home, we can do whatever we want. Our vacations will be even better, right? His nonchalant attitude was incredibly frustrating. But now that it's done, there's no going back, Robert said, echoing my own thoughts. The vacation home was undeniably beautiful, and it would certainly enhance our holiday experiences. Fine, it's already done, so there's no point blowing on it. But you should have at least talked to me about it, I said with a sigh. Surprisingly, my husband's mood lifted and he chuckled. You're right. I should have consulted you. I'm sorry. I wanted it to be a surprise for you too, Kathy. You're something else. Learning that Robert had taken out a joint mortgage without telling me, even using our shared savings, was a shock. Let's just accept it and see it as a good investment, I decided. With that resolution, I chose to enjoy the lavish celebration for my mother-in-law's birthday and our 2-day stay at the villa. As I brewed a cup of coffee, I found myself lost in memories of our time at the villa. Despite the initial shock, it truly was a magnificent place. The wood-burning stove in the living room especially stood out, promising cozy winter evenings. Feeling content, I turned to Robert. Hey, when can we go back to the villa? I want to pick out some new dishes for it. Yeah, I'll ask my parents about it. He replied, can't we just go by ourselves? I suggested technically, the villa is in our names, even though it was a gift for my parents' 60th anniversary. It wouldn't be right if they already had plans, would it? A sense of unease crept over me. Despite being in our names, I worried that practically, it might end up being more like my in-laws' property. Thinking fast, I proposed, since it's our villa, can't we invite my parents to join us too? Yeah, if they're free, he replied vaguely, but at least he didn't outright refuse. That was a relief. It meant the villa wouldn't just become my in-laws' property. However, my optimism was short-lived. For the past 6 months, I hadn't been allowed to spend the night at the villa. I could visit during the day, drop off my in-laws, prepare food, and then head back home, only to return the next day to pick them up, clean up, and drive them back. This routine had persisted despite my numerous complaints, with Robert always finding some excuse or even yelling at me. But today, I wasn't going to give up, especially since my parents' birthday was approaching. Robert, my father's birthday is in 2 months. Can't we invite them to the villa? It's our villa, I stressed, hoping to appeal to him. But his response was the same as always. If my parents don't have plans, it'll be the same story. We haven't spent a single night at the villa in the 6 months since we bought it. Your parents always get priority, but it's our villa and we should come first. Besides, I'm the one paying the mortgage and the down payment. My parents should have their turn too. Today, I'm not giving in. I've had enough, I asserted firmly, only to be met with a scowl from Robert. Shut up. That vacation house is only for my parents. I won't allow your parents to use it. I bet that was your plan all along, wasn't it? No wonder you bought it without telling me, he accused. The patience I had clung to shattered in my heart, leaving behind a sense of brokenness. I'll never forgive you, I vowed. Don't think you can act so selfishly without consequences, I challenged my husband. Fine, if that's how it is, I won't hold back anymore. Let's get a divorce. What, you're so petty, he retorted. Well, whatever. My parents appreciate me for buying that vacation home, and my mom can handle the housework. I'll be just fine without you. And if we're divorcing, I won't let you near that vacation house. Is that clear? With a smug look, he crossed his arms triumphantly. I felt foolish for falling for his smooth words, but it was too late for regrets. All that remained was to seek my revenge. In a low voice, I pressed my husband. Are you sure you'll regret this? Because I won't hesitate. Fine, it's settled then. Never shove your face in front of me again, he replied. The next day, I filed for divorce, and it was accepted without any issues. I decided to walk back to my parents' house. A few months later, I received a call from Robert's house. When I answered, he sounded panicked. I'm Kathy, what do you want? We don't have anything to talk about, he said in a frantic tone. In response to my cold response, he yelled back, I tried calling your cell phone. Why did you answer? Some person claiming to be your lawyer showed up at my house today. This is what you wanted, isn't it? Can you explain it to me properly? Don't you understand? I replied calmly. What's there to understand? He snapped back. The lawyer was right. Since we're divorced, I don't plan on paying the mortgage anymore. If you don't agree, I might sell the vacation house. That's it. But the vacation house is in both our names, even after the divorce. Isn't it fair for you to keep paying the mortgage? I questioned. My ex-husband seemed at a loss for words. Despite being in both our names, I'm not allowed to use it, right? So why should I keep paying for it? That doesn't make sense to me, he stated calmly. No, it's a joint property, so we should both contribute, I argued. This conversation isn't going anywhere. That's why I consulted a lawyer. If you're going to stick to your stance, I'm ending this call. If you need anything else, talk to my lawyer. I don't have time to deal with this unreasonable behavior. I have my own affairs to attend to, he said firmly. Wait, hold on, I interjected. I resigned from my job, he informed me. What? Why? I asked. It was probably my father's doing, right? He's an executive in a top-tier company with many connections. Robert's company president is one of them, he explained. It seems my father had a word with Robert's company president about his behavior towards me. How could we tolerate such behavior in our company? The president must have explained in anger. I don't know all the details, but I heard that Robert chose to resign voluntarily. I'm certain there was some intervention from Robert's company president behind the scenes. Please help me, Robert pleaded tearfully. My coworkers started giving me hostile looks. I made the decision to resign. I found a new job, but the salary is lower than before. I can't manage the mortgage payments on my own. Your father sees all this, right? Then shouldn't he take responsibility and keep paying the mortgage? He's so selfish, I lamented. How much further will he go to satisfy his own desires? I couldn't bear his selfishness any longer. Sure, my father might have played a role in me quitting my job, but you, Robert, are the one who started it all, aren't you? Don't try to twist the narrative to fit your agenda. You're the one in the wrong for tampering with our joint property just to impress your parents. You brought this upon yourself. I never imagined it would come to this. You're facing the consequences of your actions. I hope you suffer in the depths of mortgage hell, you selfish jerk. I heard his desperate plea, but I hung up the phone without giving it another thought. In the months that followed, I worked with a lawyer and managed to extricate myself from the mortgage for the vacation house. Eventually, Robert couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments alone, and the property ended up being sold due to its decreased value. It appeared that Robert had accumulated debt and was now struggling to make ends meet in a modest apartment. Even his in-laws were shocked by the turned events, and Robert's parents found themselves facing scrutiny from the community for losing the vacation house they had once bragged about. Meanwhile, I found fulfillment in my role as the vice president of my father's company, leading busy and rewarding days. The happiest moments now come when the three of us, myself, my husband, and our daughter, visit the vacation house on our days off, enjoying moments of relaxation with a cup of coffee.
Old man, you really are a piece of work. With someone like you, who in the world would want to drink? Simply growing older and more pitiful. You're overestimating yourself. Don't. You think. Really, it's hilarious. The last day of training for new hires was that day. While waiting for my coworkers to arrive, at the restaurant where the welcoming party was scheduled to take place, I sat by myself. However, as time went on, nobody arrived. Rather, I was made fun of on the phone. I had changed careers at the age of 50 and was now training with recruits who were as young as Meownsons. During the training, one of them, Kyle, the executive's son, was unruly, doing whatever he wanted, and continuously upsetting the workers. I had to call him out because I was tired of his actions, but that simply made him target me, and I was subjected to his small-time harassment. I was utterly alone, counting down the days until the training was completed, while everyone else ignored me. I suppose I can come if you really insist, old man, but you're paying for it all. Okay. Will you do something constructive for the next generation? Had. Something broke inside of me. I have a different plan if that's how you want to play it. With a certain resolution blazing within of me, I thought, laugh while you can, and headed for the corporation. William is my name. I'm a middle-aged man who is around 50 years old and has worked for roughly 25 years. I spent a lot of time working for the same company after I graduated from college, but last Friday I made the decision to change, and I was given a small farewell party. I had been tormented by the choice, but I forced myself to face this new challenge since I understood that you only have one life to live. The business I selected for my second start produces stationery, with a focus on mechanical pencils and ballpoint pens. It is a significant participant in the market and is essentially interchangeable with ballpoint pens. The company's pens, which are lauded for their ease of use, have become a mainstay among stationery enthusiasts as well as students riding the recent stationery boom. New items are being introduced everywhere as a result of this tailwind, and factories all throughout the nation are putting forth endless effort to meet demand. I was shown to the conference room as soon as the training began at headquarters. My pulse began to race as I noticed that a group of young individuals in suits had already taken their seats. We were divided into groups for training after Mr. Simpson, the president of the company, greeted us and gave us an overview of the company's business operations and philosophy. I was shown to the conference room as soon as the training began at headquarters. My pulse began to race as I noticed that a group of young individuals in suits had already taken their seats. We were divided into groups for training after Mr. Simpson, the president of the company, greeted us and gave us an overview of the company's business operations and philosophy. Since it was a manufacturing company, it was not unusual to be dispatched to one of the many plants, but most people would be allocated to the headquarters. Workers at the factories are in charge of running production lines and making thoughtful decisions about what and how much to create. Everything comes down to experience and learning while working. Additionally, you must oversee the schedules of temp and part-time employees. Some of these employees have been with the organization for more than 10 years, so cultivating positive connections with them is essential. Depending on the procedure, there are more part-timers, which causes cliques to emerge among them. Naturally, individuals quit all the time. Therefore, you also need to intervene and deal with those circumstances. A great deal of attention to detail is necessary for this work. I'd heard innumerable tales of people resigning because the strain was too much for them. As I listened to the staff members speak, I considered the possibility that some of the people here would eventually follow that same course. Having said that, a lot has changed and progressed since my time. I was so absorbed in those ideas that time passed rapidly. At first, we were all nervous, but gradually everyone loosened up, and soon they were chatting with me, even treating me kindly despite my age. I was touched, but there was one guy who stood out, Kyle. He was the son of an executive, Trevor. At first, he came across as a hyper-enthusiastic young guy, determined to make the training fun, but it didn't take long to notice his problematic behavior. Hey, you, go get my lunch, will you? Oh, okay, sure. Today, he once again picked on one of the more timid guys and made him fetch his lunch, while lighting a cigarette with a smug grin. Hey, you can't smoke in here. An employee tried to stop him, but Kyle just glared at him and said, I've got my future guaranteed. Hearing that, the employee couldn't say anything more, and everyone else just pretended not to notice. This only made Kyle more emboldened, and he continued bossing people around and heckling the staff during the training sessions. It was unbearable. Acting like the elder I was, I decided to warn him. Kyle, from where I'm standing, your attitude isn't exactly commendable. Kyle's eyes widened in anger. Ha! What the hell are you talking about, old man? My name isn't Old Man. It's William. Oh, just like that character from the show? Huh. That's hilarious. He was grinning, but his eyes weren't smiling at all. I could feel his simmering anger, the kind that doesn't tolerate defiance. This wasn't going to be easy, I thought. I don't mind if you joke about my name, but I'd appreciate it if you didn't cause trouble for others. Or the staff. You're here to work, aren't you? They're not your servants. You should handle your own tasks. In response, Kyle violently kicked a nearby chair. Everyone around turned to look at the commotion. Don't get cocky just because you're the oldest here, old man. Do you even know who I am? My dad's an executive here. If he wants, he could get rid of you just like that. You get that, right? With that, Kyle stormed out of the room, still seething with anger. Everyone glanced at me with concern. I put on a cheerful front. Sorry for all the fuss. Don't worry about me. I'm fine. But despite my words, their eyes were filled with obvious worry. A sense of unease crept into my heart as I feared Kyle would begin targeting me, and the harassment started. It began with small things, my training materials being torn up, my lunch deliberately knocked to the floor. He would interrupt me every time I spoke during group work, acting like a child. But Kyle was the son of Trevor. Even the staff seemed unable to intervene. My fellow trainees, afraid of Kyle, not only did nothing to stop the bullying, but began to look the other way entirely. Just talking to me could make them Kyle's next target. Sensing this tension, everyone slowly stopped speaking to me altogether. I was frustrated. I had been thrilled to relive the excitement of my early career and to be part of a group again, grateful that I'd made the decision to switch jobs. But then, just because this kid happened to be the son of an executive, he treated me like his personal enemy, mocking and belittling me at every turn. Never in my wildest dreams did I think at this age I'd be pushed around by someone like that. The once enjoyable training quickly turned into a dark, miserable experience. Each morning, I would count the days, hunched over as I dragged myself to headquarters. Just a little longer until the training is over. I just have to hold on until then. Isolated and lonely, I endured the training in silence without exchanging a single word with anyone until the final day arrived. Hey, old man, we're having a welcome party tomorrow, so book a restaurant right now. And don't screw up and pick a bad place. Just as the training ended and I was about to leave, Kyle appeared out of nowhere, barking orders at me. Wait, a welcome party? That's kind of sudden. Is everyone going? I asked. Don't complain when we're giving even someone useless like you something to do at the very least. He cut me off, shoving the responsibility of making a reservation onto me. He didn't care at all about my plans or time, and I was reminded once again of just how self-centered he was. Taking out my phone, I searched for a nearby restaurant. I found one with decent reviews and ratings and called to see if they had a table available. Since it was the day before, I thought they might refuse, but to my surprise, the staff was more than happy to accept the reservation. The person on the phone was friendly, and they offered an all-you-can-drink package with a wide variety of dishes. I was sure Kyle and the others would enjoy it. And yet, I never imagined what would happen next. The day of the welcome party arrived. I showed up on time at the restaurant I had booked, gave my name and reservation details to the receptionist, and they led me to a large private room in the back. It seemed no one else had arrived yet. I sat down, finally feeling a sense of relief. At last, the training is over. Just a little longer, and this miserable experience will be behind me. And so I waited, expecting the colleagues I had shared this journey with to arrive any minute. But half an hour passed, then an hour, and still no one showed up. This isn't right. I tapped on my phone and called Kyle. Hello. What do you want? he answered. It's William. No one has shown up, and it's past the start time. What's going on? Kyle laughed loudly on the other end before saying, Old man, you're really something, aren't you? Who would want to drink with an old geezer like you? Don't you think you're overestimating yourself? This is hilarious. Then I heard multiple people laughing on the other end of the line. It was clear that a few others had been roped into Kyle's scheme. So there was never a welcome party in the first place. You lied to me? Yeah, that's right. I felt a little bad for you, so I thought at least I could give you the honor of booking a party that was never going to happen. Seems like a perfect task for someone like you, don't you think? Kyle's prank was so malicious that I could feel my anger boiling over. Oh, but if you're paying for everything, old man, we might just show up. You've got more money than us, right? It shouldn't be a problem for you, huh? He taunted, laughing. His words pushed me to my breaking point, but I managed to stay calm enough to respond. I see. Well, this little stunt has shown me exactly what kind of person you are. If that's how you think of me, I have some thoughts of my own. I heard murmurs and whispers from the people around Kyle. Thoughts. What could an old man like you possibly do? Are you out of your mind? Kyle sounded like he was riding high on his arrogance. Kyle continued to bombard me with condescending remarks and attitude. I brushed off his words calmly, thinking through what I needed to do tomorrow. The following morning, a commotion erupted at headquarters. What's going on? Did something happen? Have you heard anything? In front of the bulletin board on the first floor, new recruits were buzzing with excitement, and the employees who overheard gathered in confusion. Posted on the bulletin board was a notice, titled, Rescinding the Employment Offer for This Year's New Hires, followed by an explanation of the reasons behind it. What is this? What the hell? William, did you know about this? I didn't respond, just stood there with my arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with a curious feeling. Then Kyle burst in, panting heavily. When he saw the bulletin board, a vein in his temple started throbbing. Hey, what the hell is going on? He spotted me and immediately grabbed at me. Why does the HR director's notice have your name on it? Did you pull some strings or something? Half panicking, he glared at me with a twisted smirk. No. I've been hired as the HR director from the start. What? Kyle's face turned even paler. Before coming here, I had spent many years working at a well-known retailer that operated nationwide, moving between various departments for the last decade or so. Before I left, I was the HR manager. When I first joined the company, the American casual boom was in full swing, and bright, flashy designs were all the rage. Our company specialized in developing American, casual-themed goods and character merchandise, which led to massive sales. However, that all changed when one of the executives was caught in a scandal. As the HR assistant manager at the time, the burden on me became overwhelming. But as an HR professional, I held a firm belief. Not a single employee would lose their job on my watch. A company is only as strong as the hard work of its employees. If that hard work wasn't recognized, the company wouldn't survive. So, along with other middle managers, we worked together to identify the company's shortcomings and brainstormed ways to make changes, starting with what we could control. We overhauled the company's outdated image, incorporating feedback from younger employees, and improving the work environment and benefits as much as possible. Through these small, gradual efforts, we eventually saw a significant drop in both sick leave and employee turnover, compared to before the scandal. Motivation started to rise, and little by little, we began to see more smiles from the employees. That kind of positive energy spreads, and soon enough, we had more business partners. One day, an employee suggested we recruit those with artistic talent to create an original company character. This sparked the launch of a character design project held as a competition. The project was open to anyone interested, regardless of their position. This initiative energized the staff even more, and with all the hard work we had put in over time, sales started to rise. Now, our original character has become incredibly popular, gaining attention from TV shows and magazines, further increasing our company's recognition. Among our product lines, stationery was the top seller, and we partnered with several stationery manufacturers. Naturally, our company was one of their clients, and Mr. Simpson, the president, made a point of visiting. Regularly, always stopping by to chat casually. During one of those conversations, Mr. Simpson apparently heard about my accomplishments, and with his eyes gleaming, headhunted me. Although I didn't expect the title HR Director to come with the job. When Kyle heard this, he stammered, flustered. "But you took the training with us. HR Directors don't go through training." Well, I wanted to observe the new recruits as the HR Director, but since I didn't know anything about this company, it seemed like a good opportunity to learn the ropes alongside everyone else. I smiled as I continued. You see, no matter how old you get, it's exciting to try new things. But I didn't expect what happened. I never imagined I'd face such petty harassment from you, and now I owe an apology to the restaurant for the trouble caused yesterday. Kyle, trembling, opened his mouth as if to say something, but just then, "Hey, where's William? Where is he?" A short, stocky, middle-aged man with a noticeably shiny head stormed in, fuming with anger. It was Kyle's father, Trevor. "I'm William." I stepped forward with a firm expression. The room was filled with a tension unlike anything before. "Hey, what's this about my son's offer being rescinded?" His face was flushed red, and his expression was less that of an executive and more of a father ready to grab me. "Trevor, nice to meet you. I'm William, the newly appointed HR Director." "I don't care about that. What's this about my son? He told me you've been harassing him relentlessly and used your position to have his offer rescinded. I won't accept someone like you as HR Director." Remaining calm, I pulled something from my pocket and handed it to him. "In that case, I have something for you as well. This is the bill for the cancellation fee from yesterday's restaurant. I'd like you to cover it." Trevor didn't take it. Instead, he swatted it away, shouting, "Are you kidding me? Where's the proof? Show me the proof." With that, I pulled out my phone and tapped on a file. What played from the phone was the recording of my conversation with Kyle after he and the others bailed on the restaurant the night before. As the recording progressed, the expressions of those around us began to change. When it finished, Kyle muttered under his breath, "What? You recorded me? Unbelievable. You old man." "Yes, and you should be aware of how disgraceful your behavior was, especially as someone aiming for a career in HR." Everyone around wore the same angry expression, brimming with indignation, but I remained completely unfazed. "No, I'd say it's your son's behavior that's truly shameful." "What did you say?" Trevor growled. "As you mentioned, I've provided proof. Now, please settle the bill." Just as Kyle shot me a sharp glare, we were interrupted. "Hey, what's going on here? Why all the commotion?" Mr. Simpson entered the room, causing Trevor to panic. "Hey, what are you all doing? Get back to work." At that, the employees who had been standing around like spectators quickly scattered. Now, only the new recruits and a few of us remained, with Mr. Simpson looking at us sternly. "Mr. Simpson, this man, William, has been spreading false accusations about my son, and I was just trying to clear things up." "Well then, let's hear your rebuttal." Mr. Simpson faced me with a serious expression. Behind him, Trevor and Kyle wore smug smiles, as if they had gained the upper hand. I kept my calm and started, "Yes, Trevor here blackmailed the previous HR manager, threatening to expose his weaknesses unless his son was hired. The room stirred, and the color drained from Kyle's face. Trevor quickly jumped in to defend himself. Mr. Simpson, that's a lie. He has no proof. That's not all. Hey, watch your mouth, Trevor shouted. Quiet, Trevor, Mr. Simpson said in a deep, resonant voice, sternly rebuking him. Trevor stood, there in shock, while Kyle flinched visibly. Mr. Simpson turned to me. William, go on. Yes. I then calmly and methodically laid out all of Trevor's past misdeeds. For all these reasons, I could no longer stand by and ignore Trevor's behavior as HR director. I then bowed deeply to Mr. Simpson. He let out a sigh and said, "Thank you, William." With those words, Mr. Simpson genuinely showed his appreciation toward me. Mr. Simpson, you're actually going to believe him. These are baseless accusations. I've heard rumors of your actions for a while now. This just confirms it. Trevor collapsed to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Kyle, too, wore a look as if the world had ended. Mr. Simpson approached me and placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. As for Trevor, while he was originally set for immediate dismissal, Mr. Simpson showed great mercy, and Trevor was demoted from executive to a regular employee. His misdeeds became well known within the company, and he was soon relegated to a desk job, shunned by his coworkers. However, Trevor couldn't shake the habits he developed after years of lording over others as an executive. He began secretly targeting weaker employees with borderline harassment, but after one of his victims filed a formal complaint about his abusive behavior, he was fired for misconduct with no severance pay. He now lives a hard life. As for Kyle, who had already left the company, rumors have it that he was arrested for causing trouble on a train and has since disappeared. What a troublesome pair they turned out to be. As for the new recruits whose offers were rescinded due to this incident, the company concluded that Kyle had led the harassment against me, and the others likely felt powerless to defy him because of his father. The company decided that those who sincerely reflected on their actions and expressed a desire to return would be given another chance. With the chaos finally behind us, I quickly got to work as HR director, proposing the steps we needed to take moving forward. Today, as part of that effort, I'll be visiting each department to listen to the concerns of the employees. My role is to ensure that each individual's voice is heard, fostering an open and supportive workplace. Navigating the corporate world is no easy task. People who grow complacent in their positions and fail to show compassion for those around them will never do good work. Building relationships takes effort, but through those experiences, we become kinder and more understanding. That's what I've learned over my long career. Moving forward, I hope to continue supporting these hardworking people from behind the scenes, doing whatever I can to help.
I hung up the phone, my hands trembling as the weight of Aunt Miriam's words sank in. "I'm cutting you out of my will. After how you treated me, you deserve nothing." The line went dead, but her bitter condemnation echoed in my mind. Kyle stormed into the living room, his face flushed with anger. What did that old bat say now? I swallowed hard, bracing myself for his outburst. She's taking me out of her will, cutting me off completely. What? Kyle slammed his fist on the coffee table, making me flinch. After everything we've done for her? The ungrateful hag! My chest tightened as memories of Aunt Miriam's kindness resurfaced. She had been more of a mother to me than my own parents, taking me in after their tragic deaths. Her home became my sanctuary, her love a constant in my turbulent childhood. But that love had twisted into resentment over the years, poisoned by Kyle's relentless demands for money and favors. I had gone along too weak to stand up to him and his overbearing parents. "This is your fault," Kyle spat, his eyes blazing with accusation. "You never stood up for us, never fought for what's ours." Shame washed over me as I recalled the countless times I had enabled his greed, sacrificing my bond with Aunt Miriam for his empty promises of a lavish inheritance. I had been a coward, too afraid to defy him and lose the illusion of wealth he dangled before me. "We're not going to take this lying down," Kyle snarled, his voice laced with determination. "That money is rightfully ours, and we're going to get it back, one way or another." As he stormed out, I sank onto the couch, my mind racing with memories of Aunt Miriam's unwavering love and support. How had I let it come to this? How had I allowed myself to become so consumed by greed and selfishness, betraying the woman who had given me everything? The weight of my guilt was suffocating, but deep down I knew the truth. I had brought this upon myself, and as the gravity of my actions settled in, I couldn't help but wonder if there was any way to undo the damage I had caused, or if I had lost Aunt Miriam forever. The apartment felt suffocating, the weight of Aunt Miriam's rejection pressing down on me. I needed air, an escape from Kyle's seething rage and the memories that taunted me. Grabbing my coat, I slipped out, the crisp night offering a fleeting reprieve. As I wandered aimlessly, flashes of my childhood flickered through my mind. The night Dad didn't come home from work, Mom's anguished sobs as the police delivered the tragic news. The deafening silence that followed, an emptiness no 9-year-old should ever have to endure. Then Aunt Miriam's warm embrace, her gentle voice soothing my fears. "You're safe now, sweetheart. I'm here for you." She had been my lifeline, my anchor in the storm that threatened to sweep me away. Her modest home became a sanctuary, filled with the love and stability I had so desperately craved. But even then, the seeds of greed had taken root, planted by Kyle's manipulative parents. "That old lady's loaded," they would sneer. "Just you wait, Trina. One day, that fortune will be yours." Foolishly, I had let their poisonous words take hold, blinding me to Miriam's unconditional love. And as the years passed, Kyle's demands grew more insistent, his parents' influence more toxic. "She owes us," he would snarl, his eyes glinting with avarice. "After everything we've done for her, sacrificing our own lives to take care of that ungrateful hag." I knew it was a lie, a twisted justification for his greed. But I was too weak, too afraid to stand up to him, to risk losing the illusion of wealth he dangled before me like a carrot on a string. "Trina, darling," Aunt Miriam would plead, her eyes brimming with hurt. "I've given you everything I have. Why isn't it enough?" But her words fell on deaf ears, drowned out by Kyle's incessant demands and the siren song of his parents' promises of riches beyond my wildest dreams. Now, as I wandered the empty streets, the weight of my betrayal threatened to crush me. I had sacrificed the one person who had truly loved me, the one constant in my life, for the hollow allure of material wealth. Aunt Miriam's words echoed in my mind, a haunting reminder of the depth of my transgression. "You deserve nothing." And in that moment, I knew she was right. I had brought this upon myself, and the only one to blame was the person staring back at me in the cold, unforgiving reflection of the storefront window. The sound of Aunt Miriam's labored breathing filled the stifling hospital room. I shifted uncomfortably in the hard plastic chair, guilt gnawing at my insides as I watched her frail form struggle for each ragged breath. "You came," she whispered, her eyes flickering open, a glimmer of hope in their tired depths. I forced a smile, unable to meet her gaze. "Of course, Aunt Miriam. Where else would I be?" Her bony hand trembled as she reached for mine, and I flinched, the weight of my deceit threatening to crush me. "I'm so sorry, dear," she rasped, her voice barely audible. "I never meant for things to end up like this." My throat constricted, the words I longed to say, the apology I owed her, stuck like shards of glass. But Kyle's voice echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of the price of defiance. "Don't be ridiculous," I managed, forcing a hollow laugh. "You've done more than enough for me already." Aunt Miriam's face fell, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "But I wanted to give you everything, Trina, to make up for all the heartache you've endured." The guilt was suffocating, a vice around my chest that squeezed tighter with each shallow breath she took. I should have been the one comforting her, reassuring her that her love and support had been enough, more than enough. But the words never came. Instead, I sat in silence, a coward too afraid to break free from the chains of greed that bound me. Later that night, as Aunt Miriam slept fitfully, Kyle stormed into the room, his face contorted with rage. "Well?" he hissed, his eyes darting to the fragile figure in the hospital bed. "Did you get through to her? Make her see reason?" I shook my head, unable to meet his accusatory glare. "Useless," he spat, slamming his fist against the wall. "We're running out of time, Trina. That money is ours, and I'm not going to let some senile old bat stand in our way." His words cut deep, but I knew there was truth in them. We had sacrificed too much, endured too many years of her empty promises and hollow gratitude. It was time to take matters into our own hands. As Kyle ranted, his voice rising with each venomous syllable, I caught a flicker of movement from the corner of my eye. Aunt Miriam's lids fluttered open, her gaze locking onto mine, a lifetime of hurt and betrayal reflected in those weary eyes. In that moment, I knew there was no going back. The fragile bond between us, once so strong and unbreakable, had been severed. And as the harsh reality of my actions washed over me, I couldn't help but wonder if I had lost her forever. The shrill ring of the phone sliced through the tense silence, shattering the fragile calm that had settled over our apartment. Kyle shot me a pointed glare as I reached for the receiver, his jaw clenched in silent warning. "Hello?" My voice trembled with trepidation. "Trina?" The nurse's voice was grave, laced with urgency. "It's your Aunt Miriam. There's been an incident. You need to come to the hospital right away." My heart plummeted, a cold dread washing over me. "What happened? Is she okay?" A waited pause, then. "She's fallen. Hit her head pretty hard. The doctors are doing everything they can, but—" She trailed off, the unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. The line went dead, but the implications lingered, a suffocating weight pressing down on my chest. I turned to Kyle, my mouth dry, struggling to find the words. "Well?" he snapped, his eyes narrowing with impatience. "What is it?" "It's Aunt Miriam," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. She's hurt. Bad." For a fleeting moment, a flicker of concern crossed his features, quickly extinguished by the ever-present hunger that burned in his eyes. "How bad?" he demanded, leaning forward, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the armrests of his chair. I swallowed hard, the gravity of the situation threatening to crush me. "They didn't say, just that we need to get to the hospital right away?" Kyle's nostrils flared, his lips curling into a sneer. "Of course they didn't," he spat, rising to his feet with a suddenness that made me flinch. "They're probably just trying to milk us for more money, the vultures." His words hung in the air, a bitter accusation that stung like a slap to the face. I opened my mouth to protest, but the words died on my tongue, withering under the weight of his scathing glare. "Well?" he barked, grabbing his coat from the rack with a forceful tug. "Are you coming or not? We can't let this opportunity slip through our fingers." Opportunity. The word left a sour taste in my mouth, a stark reminder of the depths to which we had sunk. Aunt Miriam was lying in a hospital bed, her life hanging in the balance, and all Kyle could think about was the inheritance that dangled before us like a tantalizing prize. But what choice did I have? I had made my bed long ago, sacrificing my principles and self-respect for the hollow promise of wealth and security. And now, as the consequences of my actions loomed ever closer, I found myself trapped, a prisoner of my own greed and cowardice. With leaden steps, I followed Kyle out the door, the weight of my guilt growing heavier with each stride. As we made our way to the hospital, the silence between us was deafening, punctuated only by the occasional muttered curse or impatient sigh. And through it all, a single thought echoed in my mind, a haunting refrain that chilled me to the core. What had I done? The antiseptic stench of the hospital corridor assaulted my senses as we made our way down the sterile hallway, each step echoing like a death knell. Kyle strode ahead, his gait determined, his eyes fixed on the prize that lay beyond the closed door at the end of the corridor. I trailed behind, my footsteps leaden, weighed down by the guilt that threatened to consume me. Aunt Miriam's fragile form flashed before my eyes, a haunting reminder of the depths to which I had sunk in my pursuit of her wealth. As we neared the room, the muffled sounds of voices drifted through the door. Nurses and doctors, their tones hushed and grave. A knot twisted in my stomach, but Kyle pressed on, undeterred. Without preamble, he flung open the door, the hinges protesting with a shrill creak. All eyes turned towards us, a dozen faces etched with shock and disapproval. "Well?" Kyle barked, his gaze sweeping the room with a callous indifference. "What are you all gawking at? Where is she?" A nurse stepped forward, her expression a mixture of pity and thinly veiled disdain. "Mrs. Winslow is resting," she said, her voice clipped. "She's been through quite an ordeal and needs her rest." Kyle scoffed, brushing past her with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Resting? She'll have plenty of time for that once we get her affairs in order." My heart hammered in my chest as he approached the bed, his shadow looming over Aunt Miriam's frail form. She looked so small, so vulnerable, her face pale and drawn, marred by a vivid purple bruise that bloomed across her forehead. "Aunt Miriam," Kyle crooned, his tone sickly sweet. "It's us, your favorite niece and nephew." Her eyes fluttered open, glazed and unfocused. A flicker of recognition passed across her features, quickly extinguished by a wince of pain. "Kyle," she rasped, her voice little more than a whisper. "Trina, you came." "Of course we did," Kyle replied, shooting me a pointed glare. "We're family after all, and family looks out for one another, don't they?" A tremor ran through me as the implication of his words sank in. This was it, the moment we had been waiting for, the opportunity to secure our future once and for all. "That's why," Kyle continued, his tone taking on a harder edge, "we need to have a little chat about your affairs, your will, your assets, everything." Aunt Miriam's brow furrowed, her eyes growing wide with alarm. "My will?" she echoed, her voice trembling. But I thought—" "You thought what?" Kyle snapped, his veneer of concern cracking like a brittle mask. "That we'd just let you squander everything you've worked for? That we'd stand idly by while you frittered it all away on frivolous nonsense?" His words hung in the air, a damning accusation that cut straight to the bone. I wanted to protest, to defend Aunt Miriam's honor, but the words stuck in my throat, choked by the weight of my own complicity. As Kyle raged on, his voice rising to a fever pitch, I caught sight of the nurse hovering nearby, her expression a mixture of horror and disgust. In that moment, I knew we had crossed a line, one from which there was no turning back. And as the harsh reality of our actions washed over me, I couldn't help but wonder if we had finally gone too far, if the price of our greed was too steep, even for us. The crisp autumn air did little to soothe the burning ache in my chest as I made my way up the familiar path to Aunt Miriam's home. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighed down by the burden of shame and regret that had become my constant companion. As the stately manor came into view, memories assailed me, happy times spent in its warmth and comfort before greed had poisoned everything. I could almost hear the echoes of Aunt Miriam's laughter, the gentle melodies she would hum as she tended to her beloved garden. But those days were gone, lost to the relentless march of time and our own selfish desires. The door swung open before I could raise my hand to knock, and there she stood, Aunt Miriam, her once vibrant eyes now dulled by a mix of sorrow and resignation. "Trina," she said, her voice little more than a hoarse whisper, "I've been expecting you." I opened my mouth, but no words came. What could I possibly say to undo the hurt, the betrayal we had inflicted upon her? "Come in," she sighed, turning and disappearing into the dimly lit interior. I followed, each step feeling like a descent into the depths of my own personal hell. The once inviting foyer was now a mausoleum, the air thick with the weight of shattered dreams and broken promises. Aunt Miriam sank into her favorite armchair, her movements slow and labored, a stark contrast to the vibrant woman I remembered. She gestured for me to sit, her gaze unwavering, piercing straight through to my soul. "I know why you're here," she said, her voice barely audible above the ticking of the grandfather clock. "You want to know about the will." My heart hammered in my chest, the familiar ache of greed and longing stirring within me. This was it, the moment we had been waiting for, the opportunity to secure our future once and for all. But as I opened my mouth to speak, Aunt Miriam raised a trembling hand, silencing me before the words could leave my lips. "Don't bother," she said, her eyes hardening with a resolve I had never seen before. "I've made my decision, and nothing you or that wretched husband of yours can say will change it." A chill ran down my spine, her words cutting deeper than any knife. This was no idle threat. I could see it in the set of her jaw, the steely determination that burned in her gaze. "You're cutting us out?" I managed, my voice little more than a strangled whisper. Aunt Miriam's lips curved into a humorless smile, a bitter twist of the knife. "Cutting you out?" she echoed, her tone laced with a mix of pity and contempt. My dear, you cut yourselves out long ago, the moment you decided that money and possessions were more important than family, than love. Her words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind from my lungs and leaving me gasping for air. I wanted to protest, to defend our actions, but deep down, I knew she was right. We had brought this upon ourselves, sacrificing everything that truly mattered for the hollow allure of wealth and status. As the weight of her condemnation settled over me, I felt the last vestiges of hope slip away, replaced by a cold, bitter resignation. We had played the game, and we had lost. Spectacularly, irrevocably. And as I looked into Aunt Miriam's eyes, I saw not anger or hatred, but a profound sadness, a mourning for the family we had once been, and the love we had so carelessly squandered. In that moment, I knew there was no going back, no undoing the damage we had wrought. The only path left was forward, into the desolate wasteland of our own making. The deafening silence that hung over our apartment was suffocating, broken only by the occasional muffled sob or the clink of a glass against the coffee table. Kyle sat hunched in his chair, his eyes glazed and unfocused, a half-empty tumbler of amber liquid clutched in his trembling hand. "This can't be happening," he muttered, his words slurred and thick. "Not after everything we've sacrificed." I said nothing, my own grief and shame rendering me mute. Aunt Miriam's words echoed in my mind, a damning refrain that played on an endless loop. "You cut yourselves out long ago." How had it come to this? How had our relentless pursuit of wealth and status twisted us into the very monsters we had sworn never to become? A bitter chuckle escaped Kyle's lips, jarring me from my reverie. "Well," he sneered, fixing me with a glare that cut straight to the bone. "Aren't you going to say something? Or are you just going to sit there like a pathetic lump, as useless as ever?" I flinched, his words like a physical blow. A part of me wanted to lash out, to defend myself against his vitriol, but what was the point? He was right. I was useless, a coward too afraid to stand up to him and his insatiable greed. "We're not going to let this stand, you know," he growled, slamming his glass down with such force that I half expected it to shatter. "That money is ours. Damn it. We've earned it, sacrificed everything for it." A bitter laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. "Earned it?" I echoed, my voice dripping with contempt. "Is that what you call it? Leeching off of Aunt Miriam's generosity, bleeding her dry with our constant demands and ingratitude?" Kyle's eyes widened, his face flushing with rage. "How dare you?" he spat, surging to his feet and looming over me like a menacing shadow. "After everything I've done for you, for this family?" I met his gaze, unflinching. "You mean everything you've done to tear this family apart?" I shot back, my own anger rising to the surface like a tidal wave. "Face it, Kyle, we brought this on ourselves. We let greed and selfishness consume us, and now we're paying the price." His hand lashed out, the back of his palm connecting with my cheek with a sickening crack. I recoiled, stars exploding across my vision as the metallic tang of blood filled my mouth. "You ungrateful bitch," he snarled, towering over me like a wrathful giant. "After everything I've given you, this is how you repay me." I said nothing, cradling my throbbing cheek as the weight of his words washed over me. He was right. He had given me everything, or at least the illusion of it. A life of comfort and luxury, dangled before me like a carrot on a string, always just out of reach. And in my desperation to grasp it, I had sacrificed the one thing that truly mattered: my integrity, my soul. As Kyle raged on, his voice rising to a fever pitch, I felt something within me shift, a profound weariness settling over me like a shroud. I was done, finished with the lies and the endless cycle of greed and recrimination. Slowly, I rose to my feet, my movements steady and resolute. Kyle fell silent, his eyes narrowing with suspicion as I met his gaze, unflinching. "It's over, Kyle," I said, my voice low but laced with a steely determination. "No more begging, no more pleading. We made our bed, and now we have to lie in it." His lips curled into a sneer, but I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes, the first cracks in his armor of bravado. "You're really going to let that old hag win?" he spat, his words laced with venom. "After everything we've been through?" I said nothing, simply turned and walked away, leaving him to stew in his own bitter juices. It was time to start over, to rebuild from the ashes of our shattered dreams and broken promises. And this time, I vowed, greed and selfishness would have no place in my life. This time, I would be the master of my own destiny. The harsh glare of the neon open sign cast a sickly glow over the dingy diner, its flickering light a beacon for the weary souls who sought refuge within its cracked vinyl booths. I slid into one of the worn seats, the faded upholstery creaking in protest beneath my weight. The waitress, a world-weary woman with eyes like smudged charcoal, ambled over, her pen poised over a grease-stained pad. "What'll it be, hon?" she drawled, her voice a raspy monotone. I opened my mouth, but the words caught in my throat, a lump of shame and regret rendering me mute. How had it come to this? How had I fallen so far from the gilded halls of opulence to the grim underbelly of despair? The waitress arched an eyebrow, her patience wearing thin. "Look, sweetheart, I ain't got all night. You want something or not?" I forced a nod, my throat constricting as I choked out the words. "Just coffee. Black." She shrugged, scribbling on her pad before shuffling away, leaving me alone with the weight of my thoughts. Aunt Miriam's face flashed before my mind's eye, her once vibrant features etched with disappointment and sorrow. "You cut yourselves out long ago," she had said, her words a death knell for our dreams of wealth and comfort. And she had been right. We had brought this upon ourselves, sacrificing everything for the hollow allure of material gain. Now, as the bitter consequences of our actions bore down upon us, I found myself adrift, cast out into the unforgiving wilderness with nothing but the tattered remnants of my pride. The clink of ceramic against formica jolted me from my reverie. The waitress had returned, a steaming mug of black coffee in her hand. She set it down with a thud, sloshing some of the inky liquid over the rim and onto the battered tabletop. "There you go, hon," she muttered, already turning away. "Holler if you need anything else." I nodded numbly, my fingers curling around the warm mug as if seeking solace in its simple familiarity. As the rich aroma wafted up, mingling with the stale scent of grease and despair, a memory surfaced, unbidden. Aunt Miriam's kitchen, the gentle clatter of dishes and the comforting gurgle of the coffee pot, her soft humming, a soothing melody that would chase away the shadows of my turbulent childhood, the warmth of her embrace, her whispered words of love and reassurance. A solitary tear traced its way down my cheek, mingling with the bitter brew as I raised the mug to my lips. How I had squandered that love, trampled upon it in my blind pursuit of riches and status. The diner door swung open with a jangle, admitting a gust of chill night air and a familiar figure. Kyle, his once immaculate suit now rumpled and stained, his eyes hollow and haunted. He spotted me, his lips curling into a sneer as he made his way over, his gait unsteady. Well, he slurred, sliding into the booth across from me, "if it isn't the prodigal wife, slumming it with the dregs of society." I said nothing, simply took another sip of my coffee, the bitter liquid scalding my tongue. Kyle leaned forward, his breath hot and sour with the reek of cheap whiskey. "What's the matter, Trina?" he taunted, his voice dripping with venom. "Cat got your tongue? Or have you finally realized the depths of your failure, your utter uselessness?" His words cut deep, but I refused to rise to the bait. I had heard it all before, endured his vitriol and abuse for far too long. "You know," he continued, his eyes glinting with malice, "we could have had it all. Everything we ever wanted, everything we deserved. But you just had to go and ruin it, didn't you?" I met his gaze, unflinching. "I ruined it?" I echoed, my voice low but laced with steel. "Or did we ruin it together with our greed and selfishness?" Kyle recoiled as if struck, his bravado faltering for the briefest of moments. But the mask quickly slipped back into place, his features twisting into a sneer of contempt. "Don't try to pin this on me, you pathetic excuse for a wife," he spat, his words laced with venom. "This is all on you, and you know it." I shook my head, a weary sigh escaping my lips. "Keep telling yourself that, Kyle, but we both know the truth. We did this to ourselves, and now we're paying the price." His fist slammed down on the table, rattling the cheap crockery and drawing the attention of the few other patrons. "Shut your mouth," he snarled, his eyes wild and unfocused. "Just shut your damn mouth before I—" But I never got to hear the rest of his threat. With a sudden, decisive motion, I drained the last of my coffee, set the mug down with a hollow clink, and rose to my feet. "Save it, Kyle," I said, my voice laced with a calm finality. "I'm done. Done with your threats, your abuse, your endless cycle of blame and recrimination." His mouth worked soundlessly, his bravado stripped away to reveal the pathetic, broken shell of a man beneath. "I'm starting over," I continued, straightening my shoulders and meeting his gaze head-on. "And this time, I'm doing it on my own terms, without you, without the poison of greed and selfishness that nearly destroyed me." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Kyle to stew in his own bitter juices. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt a glimmer of hope, a chance to atone for my mistakes, to rebuild from the ashes of my shattered dreams. And this time, I vowed, I would do it right.
"Why aren't you speaking to me?" I questioned, puzzled by the silence. "I've chosen not to engage with strangers," came the reply. Accepting this, I prepared to leave. Life at my husband's parents' house was challenging. I anticipated some resistance from my mother-in-law, but the cold shoulder from my father-in-law was unexpected. The atmosphere shifted notably when my sister-in-law, who openly disliked me, moved back in. Our once serene household turned tumultuous. Feeling undeterred, I muttered, "Don't assume I'll regret leaving," and swiftly packed my belongings. Just 2 days after my departure, chaos erupted in their home. My husband and I initially met at work. He was a sales representative, frequently visiting my office. As we collaborated more, I found myself drawn to his kindness and charm. While not conventionally attractive, his personality won me over, and it wasn't long before we started dating. During our conversations, he shared that he grew up in a stable family with loving parents and a sister. My background was starkly different. I had lost my parents young and was raised in an orphanage. It was a difficult past to discuss, but he listened empathetically and reassured me of his unwavering support. Soon after, he proposed, eager to advance our relationship into marriage. Upon meeting his parents and revealing my upbringing in an orphanage, they were supportive and dismissed any notion that it would impact our marriage. This acceptance warmed my heart, although my sister-in-law's reaction suggested she was less pleased. At the time, I brushed off her surprise, attributing it to the initial adjustments of our growing relationship. As our wedding approached, my husband and I contemplated living with his parents. Although it was a serious consideration, I chose to maintain my employment, especially since my husband was due for a transfer. This decision, though small, marked the beginning of many choices I would navigate in my new life as part of their family. Despite considering leaving my job to move with my husband, my career was on an upward trajectory, and I had recently been entrusted with more responsibilities. After discussing it, we agreed that he would relocate alone following our wedding. I relished the idea of enjoying our early days as newlyweds, even planning long weekend visits to ensure we had some quality time together. Moving in with my in-laws right after marrying felt overwhelming, but my husband seemed more at ease with the arrangement, likely hoping it would alleviate his mother's concerns. Since I had lost my parents at a young age, the prospect of being part of a family was appealing, and over time, I had grown fond of my in-laws, despite the challenges of balancing work and family life. One day, an unexpected situation arose that tested our otherwise content living situation. It began when my usually bossy and anxious mother-in-law was out shopping, and I was preparing to clean on my day off. My father-in-law, appearing more frazzled than usual, pulled me aside for a private conversation. "What's going on?" I inquired, noticing his discomfort. He hesitated, then shared his dilemma. "I need to take some time off work," he confessed, explaining how workplace stress and health issues were taking a toll on him. He worried about my mother-in-law's reaction. She was generally caring but prone to anxiety and could be overly critical. For instance, when he had previously taken a sick day, she had chastised him for not being more career-focused like his coworkers. My father-in-law had always been slender, but I noticed he had lost even more weight recently. Despite needing a break, he feared my mother-in-law's reaction to any mention of time off, especially since they depended on the extra income from his overtime hours. Reluctantly, he revealed that he had been sneaking out to see a doctor and now faced the necessity of a break from work. He was in a bind. "If I tell her, she might leave me," he confided, a hint of desperation in his voice. The thought pained me. My in-laws had welcomed me with open arms, regardless of my past in an orphanage, and I felt a strong desire to support them. "Okay, I'll send you money every month to cover your expenses," I offered, determined to help him through this rough patch. "I'm sorry you're going through this. Try to get better soon and return to work when you can." "Thank you so much," he replied, visibly relieved, but still burdened by the secret he had to keep. Following our conversation, he continued to pretend to go to work, maintaining the facade to avoid upsetting my mother-in-law. This secret added a complex layer to our family dynamics, but I was committed to supporting him during this challenging time. While I quietly transferred money to my father-in-law's bank account for his living expenses, my mother-in-law never bothered to check her bank statements closely, so she remained unaware of the transfers. He maintained the illusion of going to work daily, but instead, he sought solace and recovery in a mental health clinic and long walks in the serene mountains. Gradually, his health and spirits improved, and it seemed he might soon return to work. However, an unexpected turn of events shook our household dynamics. After a significant argument with her husband, my sister-in-law returned to her parents' home. "There's nothing like being back home," she declared with relief, venting about her strained marriage. "I thought I'd lose my mind staying with that foolish husband of mine. I'll be staying here for a while, so you'll need to cook for me too." From our first family gathering, it was clear she harbored resentment towards me. At her wedding, she grimaced throughout and later criticized my appearance to my face, suggesting her brother could have married someone more attractive. She also made hurtful remarks about my upbringing in an orphanage, openly calling it an embarrassment. Given that she had moved out after her marriage, I initially thought her presence wouldn't be a permanent issue in my life. Her sudden return, driven by marital troubles, seemed temporary. However, her stay extended, and her attitude grew increasingly bitter, particularly towards my father-in-law. Despite this, my mother-in-law had always treated me kindly, and I believed she would defend me against any harsh comments from my sister-in-law. Unfortunately, I was mistaken. One day, after returning from work, I sensed a shift in my mother-in-law's demeanor. She seemed distant and cold. Concerned, I approached her. "Is something bothering you?" I asked gently. Her response was chilling. "Did you know you've been talking about me behind my back?" she accused. I was stunned. "I've never spoken ill of you. You've always been kind, and I'm grateful. Why would I say bad things about you?" I responded, confused and hurt. She left the room abruptly, leaving me to face my smirking sister-in-law in the hallway. "Looks like you're not in her good books anymore. Did your true colors finally show? Being from an orphanage, your background does matter, huh? It's best not to gossip about people," she taunted. I defended myself, bewildered by the accusation. "Oh, the neighbors mentioned it when I came back. They said you've been speaking poorly of her all along," my sister-in-law claimed, adding a layer of mystery with her vague reference to unnamed neighbors. "I've never said any of those things." "Stop making things up," I protested, but my words fell on deaf ears. "Oh, how disrespectful, Mom. She's calling me a liar and being mean to me," my sister-in-law exclaimed, twisting my words as she retreated to my mother-in-law's room. Following this incident, my sister-in-law's behavior worsened. She fabricated complaints, claiming I mistreated her by making her sleep in the hallway and insisting she'd take the last turn for the bath since she was merely a guest. Each time she complained, I found myself explaining and defending my actions and words, trying to clear misunderstandings in a home that had once promised a new family and a fresh start. As time passed, it became evident that my mother-in-law was increasingly influenced by my sister-in-law's manipulative words. The situation grew more complicated when my sister-in-law prolonged her stay, and I couldn't help but wonder if she intended to make her visit permanent. This thought weighed heavily on me each day as I returned home from work, a place that once felt welcoming but now felt cold and silent. "I'm back," I announced softly upon entering the house, a stark contrast to the warm greetings I used to receive. The living room was quiet. "I'll start making dinner," I said, trying to keep the routine normal. To my surprise, as I walked into the dining area, I found my mother-in-law, father-in-law, and sister-in-law already eating sushi together. My sister-in-law smirked. "Oh, looks like someone who isn't family is here. You weren't planning on having sushi, were you?" My mother-in-law continued eating, her eyes glued to the television, ignoring my presence. "If you wanted sushi, you should have told me." "I came straight home from shopping," I replied, trying to hide my hurt. "No one mentioned they wanted that," my sister-in-law retorted, dismissing me completely. Then, turning to our parents, she cheerfully added, "Hey Mom, Dad, I went out with my friends today and brought back some delicious pudding. Let's eat together." They all indulged in the dessert, ignoring me entirely. Exhausted from work and the emotional strain, I retreated to my room, too weary to confront the blatant exclusion. The following day, my sister-in-law, preparing for another outing with friends, asked me to drive her to the station. "I can't. It's a weekday and I have work. Besides, we're not even going in the same direction, and you want to leave around noon," I explained, my patience wearing thin. "Just take the day off. It's fine. Your cute little sis-in-law just wants a ride. She hasn't had a chance to relax since she got married, right? Can't you be a bit nicer to her now?" she pleaded, trying to manipulate the situation. "With all due respect, didn't you go out with friends last night after getting a late call? It seems like you've been going out almost every day since you came back. I have work." "Please take the bus or train," I countered, standing my ground as my mother-in-law and sister-in-law whispered to each other. I left for work, determined not to let the situation escalate further. However, the tipping point came that evening. Work had delayed me, and I arrived home late, soaked from the rain, groceries in hand, bracing for yet another cold reception. As expected, they were eating dinner without acknowledging me, continuing the pattern of the previous days. But what awaited me in the courtyard was far worse than any cold shoulder. In the middle of the garden, illuminated by the dim porch light, lay a pile of my belongings. My designer bag that I had bought with my first paycheck, shoes that were a birthday gift from my husband, and even my work computer, all drenched from the rain. My sister-in-law stood there smirking triumphantly. Having the stranger's things in the house grosses me out, so I threw them out. "Flaunting a designer bag like that, how arrogant of you," she sneered. Stunned, I turned to my mother-in-law and father-in-law. "Why didn't you stop her? Have I done something to make you believe her lies about me, bad-mouthing you and bullying her? Aren't you upset with her for what she did?" I pleaded for some sign of support. My mother-in-law avoided my gaze and remained silent, then finally muttered, "I can't talk to strangers. I can't be friendly with someone who's not family." Hurt and bewildered, I asked, "Where's my father-in-law?" He had been the one I supported during his time off, the only one who seemed to appreciate my efforts to blend into this family. As the silence stretched on, the harsh reality of my situation became painfully clear. I had been managing the finances in our household, a task I undertook out of gratitude for being welcomed into the family. But when conflict arose, I found myself longing for some support, especially from my father-in-law, whom I had financially supported during his time off. As the tensions escalated, I hoped he would stand by me. But when the moment came, he merely walked past without a word and retreated to his room. "That's it for me," I murmured to myself, feeling a mix of resignation and resolve. My sister-in-law, seizing the opportunity to twist the knife further, sneered, "Oh, are you upset?" "I'm sorry, not honestly. I never liked you from the start, coming from an institution and all. Just don't regret leaving. Good riddance." I retorted sharply. The decision was clear. It was time to leave. I quickly packed my belongings, aware that even though my father-in-law might worry about losing my financial support, he didn't make any move to stop me or defend me. His silence was the final straw. Driven by a need to escape the toxic environment, I didn't even discuss these issues with my husband before leaving. I suspected that my mother-in-law hadn't informed him of my sister-in-law's return or the ensuing conflicts. If he had known, surely he would have reached out, knowing the strained relations between us. But there had been no word from him on the matter, and a part of me feared that perhaps he too was influenced by his family's narrative. With a heavy heart, I got into my car and drove straight to my husband's new job location far away. All the while, doubts about his loyalty and our future together clouded my mind. Perhaps he sided with his family, I feared, and if so, could divorce be the only solution? Upon arriving at his apartment, he wasn't home yet, likely held up by end-of-month work. As I waited, the lights in the apartment signaled my arrival, and soon my husband walked in, surprised and delighted. "What, you're here? You should have told me you were coming. I would have come back sooner. What a pleasant surprise." His face lit up with a genuine smile, a stark contrast to the coldness I'd faced at his family's home. The mix of relief and humiliation overwhelmed me, and tears started to form. "What's wrong? Did I do something seriously? What's going on?" he asked, his concern palpable. Taking a deep breath, I began to explain everything. Told him about supporting his father during his medical leave, his sister's return and prolonged stay, her lies that turned his mother against me, and the cold treatment that escalated to my belongings being left out in the rain. Through tears and pauses, I laid bare the painful reality of my days with his family. After hearing everything, my husband was apologetic. He regretted being too wrapped up in work to notice the signs and deeply lamented his family's behavior towards me. He assured me that I wouldn't have to return to that house or interact with them if I chose not to. His response provided a sliver of hope that perhaps, with his support, we could navigate through this turmoil together. Despite the possibility of forgiveness someday, my husband was resolute about severing ties with his parents and sister. He also firmly declared that he would cease all financial support to his father. That night, I felt an immense burden lift from my shoulders. The stress I had been carrying dissolved, and I slept soundly beside him for the first time in ages. After leaving my in-laws' house, I never returned. Commuting to my husband's out-of-state location wasn't feasible, but fortunately, I had already arranged with my company to work remotely. My job didn't require constant office presence, and many of my colleagues were also working from home. Although I still needed to visit the office a few times each month, some of my colleagues lived even farther away, so remote work was a well-established practice. Living under the same roof as my in-laws and enduring my sister-in-law's antagonism had kept me from truly enjoying married life. Now, as we settled into our new routine, it felt like we were finally starting our lives as newlyweds. I was setting up my remote workstation when unexpectedly my sister-in-law reached out to me. It turned out that the day after I left was my father-in-law's payday, a day my mother-in-law typically managed by transferring a portion of his paycheck to their household account. This time, however, she was unable to do so, and only then discovered that I had been supporting them financially during his time off. "Hey, why didn't you tell me you were covering the living expenses?" she demanded over the phone. He asked me not to. He didn't want you to know, so I respected his wishes. I responded calmly. "We're running out of money for living expenses, and there's no one here to cook or do laundry. The place is a mess. As his wife, you need to come back and take care of these things, and send money quickly," she continued, her voice desperate. "How heartless," she exclaimed. "I've already told you I have no intention of going back to that house or being treated like your maid. Why should I help people who despise me, ruin my things, and treat me this way?" I replied, "Aren't you his wife?" "Without your help, we can't pay the bills or even shop," she continued, her voice desperate. "That's exactly why I'm saying it. I'm an outsider, so it's none of my business, right?" I reflected on her own words. I hung up the phone, ignoring her further complaints. Despite her and my mother-in-law's attempts to reach me with calls and messages, I stood firm in my decision. No longer would I allow myself to be drawn into their chaos or be manipulated by guilt. It was a liberating moment, affirming my resolve to start anew with my husband, free from the toxic ties that had once bound us. Despite the persistent calls from my in-laws, I chose to ignore them completely. However, when my husband returned from work and finally answered the phone, he addressed them with unwavering firmness. "I will never forgive how you treated her. I'm not sending her back to you, and I'm not coming back either. I don't see you as my family anymore. Leave my wife alone, or you'll regret it," he declared. Considering how much my sister-in-law idolized her brother and my mother-in-law's dependency on him, this declaration must have come as a shock to them. A few days later, my father-in-law called, his voice laden with desperation. He explained how difficult life had become living with my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, and begged me to resume the financial help. Although they had welcomed me into the family despite my orphanage background, their lack of support when I needed it most made me realize I owed them nothing. "I will never assist you again," I told him firmly, and ended the call. Subsequently, in an act of sheer desperation, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law shamelessly showed up at my workplace, knowing their potential for creating disturbances. I had already briefed my company about the situation, and security was alerted immediately. They caused a scene, demanding that the company force me to send money back home. When my husband found out, he was incensed and advised me to report them to the police. My colleagues were incredibly supportive, encouraging me to focus on my work and my life with my husband, far removed from the toxic environment of my in-laws. The stress took its toll on my father-in-law, whose health declined significantly due to the pressure exerted by my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Eventually, he had no choice but to quit his job. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law attempted to return to her husband's family, but he refused to take her back. The town quickly caught wind of her dramatic antics at my workplace, exacerbating her already troubled marriage, which promptly led to their decision to divorce. Without any support, my in-laws and sister-in-law moved to a modest apartment and started working part-time jobs to make ends meet. As for my husband and me, we were finally enjoying peaceful, fulfilling days together. Our home became a sanctuary of love and support, far from the strife we had endured. Recently, we received joyous news. We are expecting a child. The anticipation of meeting our baby fills us with happiness. We are eagerly awaiting this new addition to our family, cherishing every moment of this special time together.